Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Picciuto, and I'm very excited to have my new friend, Frank Carlisi, on the line with us today. Frank, how you doing, buddy?
Nice to see you, my friend. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. It's Wednesday. The sun's out. It's like 26 degrees, so it's not zero.
Freezing.
So everything's looking up.
Close enough. Yep, close enough.
Can you introduce yourself to the listeners?
I sure can. My name's Frank Carlisi. First and foremost, I'm thrilled to be here. I am the co-owner of the ExV Agency. We're event producers and business development specialists. And I also run a non-for-profit called Women Building Women, which focuses on helping women in underserved communities through career development and advancement. Yeah.
That's awesome. So first things first, how did you get into the event industry? And then what made you start the nonprofit?
Got it. I'm Italian, and getting into the event industry was every Sunday at my grandmother's kitchen, helping her serve spaghetti and meatballs and braciole and the marinara sauce and the whole thing. I think a story is my grandmother used to tell that I used to butler pass hors d'oeuvres at like 3 years old. I used to just walk around and be like, "Here, eat a meatball, Grandpa." Why, So that's how it's always been in my blood. I'm a classically trained chef, actually. I went to the French Culinary Institute.
Oh, no shit.
So I come to the events industry, and I'm an event producer by way of food, which is very important to me. And it's always been a through line in everything that I do, which is super interesting and a different perspective for an event producer. We definitely are, we started our event company. I'd say we started it officially in 2018, my partner Karen Gamba and I, but I've been an event producer my whole entire life. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
That's awesome. And you grew up in the Bronx, you said?
I did. I grew up in Morris Park. Shout out to St. Francis Xavier Grammar School. I did. Loretta Park. I definitely grew up in the Bronx in the late 80s, early 90s. So I'm a 90s kid. Everything about the Bronx I miss every day of my life. Growing up, going to the comic book store, playing arcade games at Side Street Sports and all that, playing roller hockey. I played hockey my whole entire life. So
Nice.
I definitely grew up in the Bronx. That's my Bronx experience. And great pizza, of course. Better than New Jersey, John.
Whoa.
Throwing that out there
for
you.
We don't have to start a fight. We just became friends, Frank. Come on. We'll take this thing slow. I think it's cool that, like, from one Italian to another, obviously food was sort of ingrained into our upbringing, right? Like, it was Sunday dinners with the family. I think it was a very fortunate sort of tradition that was instilled to at least me at a young age. I'm sure you as well, as you mentioned. And I think it differs a lot from, other places in the country. But talk to me about how, like, those kind of, institutions as a child, like, Sunday dinners with the family, holidays like that, kind of like instilled into you something that made you kind of go into the career that you have now.
Sure. Yeah. I think at the core of everything, I could say right now in my life, I'm longing to get that back. If I'm being honest, I actually lost my mother 10 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. She passed away from brainstem cancer. And it happened very quickly. And she was sort of the glue that held the huge family together, if you will. 11 cousins on one side. We had, the deal. So when my mom passed, I kind of lost that feeling, that sort of family table that we had every Sunday, and she was always the host and always did that. But when I lost her, I think I sort of made a career pivot to try to get that back, interestingly enough. So I'm chasing that every day. And yes, I'm an event producer. We work with clients, but at the core of it, I'm always trying to bring people together, and I'm always trying to, I'd say, offer up a service that's making an impact at the same time. And that's kind of where the non-for-profit came from. And the non-for-profit, believe it or not, came from an event. Oh. My company, my partner and I, we did an event for women in the events industry in New York City. We did it at Webster Hall, which I'm sure you've been,
Very
of
cool.
course, iconic. And we sold it out. literally just out of gumption and just wanting to share a message and have a charitable benefit to that particular event, we were getting DM'd like, get us a ticket, how do we get into this? And it was serving women, and we put women on the panels. It was panel discussions to share their insights that normally wouldn't be up there, that weren't C-level professionals. They were hardworking women that I respected my whole entire career, that helped me personally and my partner and the whole community at large. And we did that. That was on January 28th, 2020.
Oh, boy.
Amazing
Lifetiming, yeah, right.
Lifetiming. Our career, our business was on such an amazing trajectory, and then lost everything. And I think the date was March. I shouldn't say lost everything. Lost
Everything
business
changed,
on March 12th. Found a lot too, which I definitely want to get into with you. Found a lot, but that's
it's funny. I have a very similar. I did work for an event management company for about 3 years. It was focused on C-suite conferences, business conferences with Fortune 500 companies. Learned a lot, traveled a lot. It was really cool. But I had a very similar experience with the pandemic, because I took a job on March 9th, was my first day with a new employer.
That's my birthday. My birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
It coincided with a very rough 6-month period of my life, which culminated with my termination in August of 2020. And I think, things in life, timing-wise, career-wise, I used to be a person that was constantly chasing dollar figures and nicer things and, really stuff that doesn't matter, right? And I think when you go through an experience where like a pandemic, something like that really tests you as a human being, I was thankful enough to learn a lot about myself, and I was afforded an amazing severance package, which allowed me to travel across the country and with my car and my camera, and I really realized what I wanted to do with my life, which was be a photographer and also start this podcast. So I'm really curious how, obviously in an event industry, which, for the better part of the last 2 years, things are obviously getting better now. How has this pandemic kind of impacted you, not just financially, but just from like a career perspective?
Sure. I love this question. I could definitely start by saying the things I did in my pajamas. I have a lot to tell my grandkids sometimes with no pants on.
Yeah.
You know the deal. I'll have a lot of stories to tell my grandkids, things that I've accomplished that I never thought I'd be able to do, honestly. I think my trajectory with the pandemic is that, I literally had COVID that week, March, that night, on my birthday that year, March 9th. I was, out of it, completely delusional. My partner Karen's like, Frank, lay in bed for a week, however long you need. I'm going to figure this out for us. We lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in one day. Clients just, obviously not able to cancel. So she, thank God for her. She's my saving grace. She is always my inspiration and my motivation. She thought long and hard, and she's like, we have to pivot. We have to start getting out there. And we've did things during the pandemic, like live streaming events for non-for-profits, getting in there and just offering services. I'm a storyteller. I love to create content. It's what I love to do. My brain thinks in pop culture references. I said, how can my skill set help non-for-profits? And we worked with some, we produced some fundraisers online, and to this day they're still fundraising and making money off of content that we were able to produce for them. Sort of self-taught, but not really. It was innate inside of me that I found out all of these creative streams started to come out during the pandemic. In another sort of silo of what I do, I partner with a company and I develop unscripted reality TV show concepts to hopefully get sold to networks. It's another sort of side passion of mine. Hopefully one day it'll be a full-fledged career, but right now it's something that I navigated along with another partner, and we were pitching shows to NBC in my living room. It was we just developed some great ideas, and we're like, we're going to figure this out. And we networked through a computer screen,
Hmm.
and we met the most amazing people. And we had a film crew go out to Kansas during COVID to film a concept that we came up with.
Oh, sweet.
So I'm going to say that my COVID experience was, of course, being in New York at the beginning of the pandemic was a challenge. Seeing the poverty, seeing the streets, seeing just all of not New York, the New York that we know and were born into, was difficult and definitely was a challenge for me. But I'm proud of some of the things I've been able to accomplish during COVID. Something that I will say that I'm just thinking of now, and I don't think I've ever made this connection. I think my fear started, COVID's not over yet, of course,
Sure.
but started at the end of this. Because it's like, what do I do now?
Oh, totally.
I have to I have to pivot again. And that drive to do so, I think was harder for me than the beginning having to change my business model going into COVID.
Sure. Well, because at the
Yeah,
time in the beginning of it, everything is extremely reactionary, right? You're hit with,
right,
I'm sick, I don't feel well, I'm stuck in bed, we're losing money, things are falling apart. It's all
right,
reactionary. You don't have time to really stop, sit around, and think about what the next step is. And, thankfully,
exactly.
over the course of a very fucking long 2 year period of time, you kind of get a
Okay,
little bit of a runway in front of you now where you have time to sit and think things out versus it's not like every 5 seconds things are fucking blowing up. And
exactly.
2 years later, it's about time. um,
Yeah, yeah, of
I've often found
course.
that a lot of people sort of went one of two ways throughout the last course of the last 2 years. It was either
Mm-hmm.
an immense catalyst for something new, and or just like people sort of changed a lot, right? They really
Yeah,
internalized things. They sort of became different versions of themselves. And I'm thankful, and it seems like for you as well, that it was a really huge, cataclysmic event that really, for the benefit of me, changed me. And I
yeah.
think you can take sort of loss and tragedy in your life and do one of two things from it. You can learn from it and grow from it, or you can kind of like turtle shell and go into yourself.
Right.
So I would love to kind of dig into like, the time period that you had after your mother passed away and like kind of where your life
Sure.
was at then, and then like how you kind of dealt with that grief and then like sort of took that into the next phase of your life and your career.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm happy to discuss this because I don't often get to do so. Lots of therapy after that, but you never really get to like express that sort of trajectory and how it affected everything else. It's interestingly enough, it happened at age 29, and I moved at 39 to Atlanta from New York for living in New York for 40 years. So I noticed this sort of 29, 39. What's going to happen at 49? We'll see. We'll have to talk then. But I definitely think that after my mother passed away, I threw myself into work. I mean, I was just a newly out of culinary school chef. And I went to culinary school because I wanted to start a catering company at the time. I named it Tony Ann's Catering. My mom's name was Tony Ann.
Mm.
The logo was her signature, her handwriting, of
Oh,
her
I
writing
love
her
that.
name. And I had both my crazy sisters working there, my best friend, her mother, people I went to high school with, people from the old neighborhood. I used that experience to bring everyone I loved together to doing something that we all love to do. And that's what I did for almost 7 years.
Hmm.
I hustled. I had a very successful catering company in Westchester, New York, and just sort of numbed that loss because it goes back to what we were discussing before. It's rooted in food. It's bringing everyone together, and that's my coping mechanism,
Mm.
and that's what I do. And I think a lot of people do that
Sure.
actually, but yeah, we did that for a while, and I think that time could have been a lot darker, I think, but I really sensed my mother there. Obviously, I had her DNA in my business, literally, but I sensed her so strongly there, and I knew that she said, I got to make my son busy because that's how he keeps moving.
Mm,
And she did that. She gave me that opportunity.
I love
So yeah,
that.
that was that period.
I think we're in an interesting time in human history where like a lot of life and it might have been this way 20 years ago and 10 years ago when I was in my 20s, like who knows. I'm 36. Community building has been the single greatest thing that I've witnessed over like the last 2 years. I've
Mm-hmm.
been lucky enough to have a lot of great conversations with a lot of calm famous people who have got a lot of social media followings, etc. And what
Sure.
I'm constantly inspired by are people who are taking time out of their life to see other people be successful and build community around themselves. And to me, when I look at someone like you who's doing things like this nonprofit, who's starting
Mm-hmm.
companies with their family and their friends and their neighborhood, that's community building in itself. And I mean, I love that. That's
Thank you.
tremendous. I would love to know how
Thank
you
you.
go from catering to events and like kind of how obviously there was a transition at some point from going to running your own
Yeah,
catering company to your own event company. And I'm sort of curious
sure.
how that process kind of unraveled.
Yeah, it's called burnout and a bad back.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So it's called there's not enough cortisone shots in the world to make you stand on your feet for all those hours hunched over chopping carrots and celery and all that good stuff. But no, I made a strategic move. Honestly, I grew up in the Bronx and lived in Westchester for the better part of my life. And all I wanted to do was get to Manhattan. It was one of these stories. I'm a born and raised New Yorkers are like unicorns in the city.
Hmm.
Um, so I just wanted to be there. I wanted my life to be there. I wanted to grow a family there, live there, and it for an interesting thing, and maybe you could relate to this. Um, Not living in Manhattan, it feels so far away sometimes when you're around the city and you don't live there. It doesn't feel like it's right there for you to attain. It feels like it's for others.
Mm,
That was at least my experience. And I just wanted to be there, even though I was so close. I was just in Yonkers, New York,
yeah.
not that far. So I wanted to get down to the city, and I came to a crossroads where I had a huge business opportunity that would have kept me in Westchester for the better part of another decade. So I said to myself, you can continue down this road and keep growing, and of course you'll do well. You'll always figure it out, or do you go where you want to be? And I made a very bold decision to sell my business, which was difficult at the time, very difficult to walk out of those doors, but I did it, and I got myself down to the city, and I took a job again, you know, um, in a very in a corporate environment. And I think during that process, I learned that that didn't work for me either. Something about autonomy is appealing to me, and just this spirit that I feel like I have oftentimes gets repressed in a corporate setting.
Sure.
It could be challenging, and I know you could relate to that too. So I found my way just by the support of other people in the events industry, actually enough, grabbing me by the shoulders and going, start your own business now,
Mm.
basically. And I've had some great mentors, and that's kind of how the event company started.
That's awesome. Um,
Yeah.
so having gone from the catering business into working in a
Yeah.
corporate environment, I would
Hmm.
imagine since you're used to starting your own company, so there is inherent confidence in your ability to create a business and be successful.
Hmm.
But in sort of a vertical that you hadn't really dabbled much into, you worked in the event industry for a short period of time. So I'm wondering what inside of you gave you the
Mm.
confidence that you were like, oh, I could do this. I've got no concerns. I know I'll make this work.
I'm going to be very honest with you. I didn't have that confidence
Oh,
at
interesting.
all. At all. I think that I under I personally I undersell my own professional talents all the time. I think it's a common human trait. Sometimes I'll be in a setting and I go, "Wait a minute. How am I producing this? Is this some my lack of confidence comes in, and maybe that comes from being a very shy kid, or someone that didn't have confidence growing up. You didn't move away from the house. You stood there. You grew up in the neighborhood. And I've always been pushing that, but always feeling unconfident in doing so. So I I think I found my confidence in the support of others. I
Hmm.
don't think I had it inside of me until the pandemic, honestly.
Hmm.
That's an honest truth. I think I found my confidence in shocking myself and surprising myself at what I was capable of because I had no other choice. And it was fight or flight. If I didn't get that business, we weren't eating. I didn't qualify for unemployment. I wasn't able to really take any advantage of any of the, government support, very minimally. But I had to do it, and I figured it out. And that confidence is now coming through me in interesting, creative ways that I never thought I'd find in my life, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's like
Yeah.
one of the, I'm gonna say joys. One of the things that I've learned about myself and like that I've
Hmm.
really enjoyed learning about myself is that I'm not doing anything that I thought I'd be doing when I was 25, right? Like, so at 25, I
Right.
was like, I'm going to work in corporate America forever and I'm going to make a lot of money and I'm going to have a nice house and I'm going to have a nice wife and like all these things that you think are important.
Yeah.
And like 10 years later, I don't have any of those things. You know what I mean? I don't have a wife. I don't have a corporate job. I don't have tons of money. It's like all the
Of
things that you
course.
put into a box and you think that you need to check them off as you go along are really not important when you stop and look and take stock of like what you want out of your life. And I think that's been one of the
Very
great
true.
great joys of my life is realizing that the things that I used to hold as important don't have to be that way anymore. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, for
Really
sure.
important to know.
I've
Yeah.
often talked about how a lot of my life has sort of been mapped out into these big events, right? Like you were always
Hmm.
projecting time out in your life 5 years out. You're always like got
Yeah.
to do well in high school to go to a good college to get a good job. And I
Hmm.
very rarely in my 20s ever stopped to like smell the roses or like figure out if the things that I was doing was making me happy. And somewhere in
Yeah.
my 30s that changed a lot. Like I started
Mm.
to take stock in what was making me happy and what was filling me up. I'm curious, you said you're 40, how do you now
Hmm.
frame your present life and your future life and start of put out what you want out of the next, next chapter of your life?
Sure. Yeah. Turning 40 was interesting. I mean, it changes your perspective in an interesting way. Like you said, you're not where you expected to be, but no one is now.
Sure.
So the playing field is sort of level. People are now coming back to the careers that they had. Um, I honestly, I think this is a great question. I still my I measure my self-worth in my career for sure. Let's start with that. And I always am, I'm still doing it. I'm still chasing it. I'm still saying, well, if we sell this TV show, I'm gonna do X. Or if we book this huge event, this is what the business looks like in 2 years. I'm still trying to learn this. And if you have any advice on how to be better at not just being more in the moment. I have a partner, my partner Steven. He is the person that lives in the moment more than anyone I've ever met in my life. So I'm trying to learn from him. And every day, I think I still am chasing that. What's happening next? What are we doing next? I'm really looking forward to stopping that, honestly. And I'm not there yet.
Yeah, so a couple things that I've learned. It's
Yeah.
like a lot of times through these hard trials and tribulations that I've encountered in my life, I
Yeah.
never thought about them. I'm like, oh, this sucks.
Hmm.
This girl cheated on me, or I lost this job, or whatever it might have been, right? I was like, this
Yeah.
sucks. I'm over it in 5 seconds. Having now gone through therapy, I realized that was just me regressing, repressing these feelings and not like actually dealing with them. And one of the things that
Yeah.
I learned is, through reading books and therapy and all these things, is like it's very easy to pretend like things don't bother you, and it's very easy for you to think that things
Oh,
that
yeah.
matter actually don't. So what I mean by that is like
Hmm.
a lot of times I was getting caught up in how many Instagram followers I have, how many likes things were getting, what kind of car I was driving, what kind of watch I was wearing, like all these things that I
Yeah.
thought were a status symbol was really just me like keeping up with the Joneses. And
Sure.
it took really the pandemic and me losing my job for me to realize like, what the fuck am I doing? Like I'm literally doing
Hmm.
all of these things in life for someone else and not for me. And
Yeah.
when you're removed from it's like sort of an outer body experience. I'm removed from life, right? Like workforce is gone, job is gone, everything that I have to worry
Crazy.
about is gone, and then now I have the ability to sort of look inward and figure things out. And that's basically what transpired. I had an absolute terrible 2020. I laugh. 2020 was like the best year of my life financially, and then like the worst year of my life everything else. 2021
Yeah.
was the best year of my life and the worst year of my life financially, and now 2022 is when I'm putting everything together, where I'm going to have
Hmm.
both amazing financial success and life success and marrying it into one. And I think what people don't do is figure out what that looks like for them, right? So like for me,
Hmm.
financial
Yeah.
success was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. That's all that mattered. But it wasn't like, oh, well, like how much money do I actually need? It was I just need more. And
Mm.
personal success wasn't, well, all my friends are getting married. I guess I should be getting married and I should be doing this. And then it wasn't like, well, do I want that? Right? So it's like a lot of my life was spent looking at what I was supposed to have versus knowing what I needed. And
So interesting.
that's what changed a lot for me for sure.
That's so interesting. I had a call with a friend right at the beginning of the pandemic, and the first thing he said to me was, "Look at your metrics differently right now. Don't look in your bank account. Don't look in your social media presence. Just start to pivot what your metrics to yourself look like." That was the best advice I got. It changed everything. It took that sort of weight that I've been carrying around, and I said, okay, I can look at the situation a little bit differently through a different lens for sure. And that's something that I definitely carried through.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
for sure. You know,
I ask the question a lot on my podcast, like, what is your
yep.
greatest success to date? And I've
Hmm.
stopped asking that question because I'm not interested in what you've done. That's awesome now. It's more so, how
Hmm.
do you measure success in your life now? Right? Like, what do you do on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? And how do you measure that as being successful in what you're doing?
Hmm. Wow. If I'm answering that very honestly, I think I measure success in looking into my 2-year-old niece's eyes and knowing that her future is taken care of. That is going to be my metric from now on. I may not get to have children of my own, but to look at a future generation and know that I'm doing everything that I can for her is going to be my metric from now on. I still am not sure what success is.
Mm,
I'm still confused as to, I could have all the money in the world. I've been there. I've made well into the six figures. I've made nothing. We're gonna remove financial from success because it doesn't mean anything. We've all just learned that. Personal fulfillment, contentment with yourself is a great metric for success. I still don't think I'm there yet. I still don't think I'm fulfilled creatively. I'm more creative than I've ever been, but I'm still working at it. So I honestly think the only time I ever feel successful is when I look at Marina and I say, my niece, and I say, and I know that she's going to have an uncle, she's going to have a mom and dad and another, or my other sister, her aunt, that are going to take care of her. I'm finding my success in the next generation. That's my honest answer to that question.
and that's a
Yeah.
great question. And because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the thing that you realize, 2 years into a pandemic, and when you start
Yeah.
getting to a certain age where, you hit a certain age and life is more about what gets taken from you versus like what you get out of it. And it's how
Mm.
you sort of frame those contexts when you start losing things. And the number
Sure.
one thing that you gain through tragedy and grief and loss is perspective and the things that matter in life
Totally.
is not things, it's
Hmm.
people and the relationships that you have with your friends and your family. And that to
That's
me has
true.
been an invaluable lesson that I learned over the course of the pandemic, because who did I spend time with over the last 2 years? Wasn't my friends, wasn't girlfriends, it wasn't dating, it was my family. Because
Yeah.
who else are you going to risk seeing, and potentially killing your parents, or I mean, it's like it's
Of
one
course.
of the most invaluable things that I learned. And yeah,
It
I
is.
think the fact that you're able to look at what is important to you and do things with a the right lens is obviously why you'll be
Yeah.
successful moving forward. There's no question.
Thank you. Oh, that's awesome to hear. I appreciate that. I'm still hustling.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to find it. I think I'll find it. I really do. I'm not there yet,
I
but I
think
think I will.
like you said before, no one's really
Yeah.
ever there, right? Like even if you're at the
Yeah.
pinnacle of your career, no one's got it
Mhm.
100% buttoned up. Maybe like Barack Obama. I don't know. He was the president. He's got a great family. He's probably doing
Yeah.
pretty well.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
I think like the one of the coolest things that's transpired over me for the last 2 years since really years since I started doing this podcast is being able to have
Hmm.
these kind of conversations with people and talking
Love
about
it.
things that fill you up, like things that like make you happy, things that give you confidence. But something
Hmm.
that I've struggled with a lot, and as a photographer and a person who makes like creative outlets, is imposter
Hmm.
syndrome. And I'm curious
Oh,
how you, as a
yeah.
creative and as a person who's started multiple companies and dealt with sort of being their own boss, how you deal with imposter syndrome.
I love that you asked me this. I was listening to some of your other podcasts before coming on to have the opportunity to speak with you, and something I wrote down was the fear of a creative person. It's it's the fears of a creative, and this is I'm it's definitely kismet that you asked this question. It's something I live with every day. So imposter syndrome, people are constantly, I've lived my life with people taking my ideas and monetizing them. I
Oh,
speak to my partner about this all the time, and people taking intellectual property and using you as far as they can, and then sometimes wringing you out dry and just running with it.
sheesh.
We have clients, that's a different story, but on a personal level and on a creative level, it's something that you have to insulate yourself from. And I've learned that the hard way.
Hmm.
I really have, especially developing television concepts and that sort of world. Learning about that world has been eye opening. How do you protect your idea? And I've always been of the school that if you call me up and you're like, I need some career advice, I'm going to give you everyone I know, phone number, email, go. I want to see you do well. Again, back to measuring success in other people. I guess that's my through line. I want to see you succeed because then I feel successful watching you grow. But that is a double edged sword because now those contacts that I've sent to many people are now being used to have hundreds of $1,000 business deals, and they don't take my call anymore.
Well, that's
So
fucked.
that's an example of it. And by the way, I didn't know I could drop an F-bomb on here. I'm from
Oh,
the Bronx.
go
You're lucky
nuts.
I haven't dropped them all over the
Yeah,
place.
no, I have a E rating on all of my podcasts because as a Jersey Italian, a fuck is pretty much my
Yes. Oh,
my go-to vernacular.
it's poetry. A perfectly placed fuck is perfect. That's why when the name of your podcast, the wrong advice. I'm like, the wrong advice I always give people is use the F word whenever you can, which I think is the right advice
It
because
is the
it's
right
great.
advice. It's
I,
funny. When we were
it
younger,
sure.
people would always say, like, if you
Yeah.
curse, you're looked at as, like, non-intelligent and it's, like, a
Right.
uncouth thing. And it's actually
It's a little,
completely
yeah.
the opposite because people who
Oh
curse
yeah.
and people who don't, like, make their bed every morning and all these things and stay up late
Hmm.
are all signs of, like, highly intelligent, highly creative people. So to, like,
Very
my
true.
junior high school guidance counselor or whatever, fuck you. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Totally kidding.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah, but
funny.
that's got to
That's
be
very,
tough when
very
you
true.
have like something that you come up with, or the what's the old saying? Like there is
Hmm.
no adage amongst the no something with thieves or
Mm.
whatever. Like
Yep.
they should be taking care of you if you put people together and are making significant investments in deals and stuff, and like
Sure.
that's tough to deal with for sure. I'm super curious
Yeah.
how you take those situations and move on from them, because that would, like, to me,
Wow.
leave a very lasting, lingering effect. It goes directly opposite to
Absolutely.
community building. It's like, fuck people till you
Yeah.
get everything that you need.
Yeah, it's tricky. I've experienced it. I internalize it often. Thank goodness, I have a partner, and her and I can vent back and forth in these cases. So there's a sounding board for it. I try not to take it personal anymore. I've just had a very recent experience with this happening, with some IP that was taken and is now being worked on in a different way. And, the person's not returning my phone calls. But I'm looking at it differently now. If you can get that idea over the finish line, then you have my support,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one thing to have an idea, and then it's one thing to believe in an idea so much that you're going to actually get it done. I disassociate the two now
Mm.
because of all of this. You could have the idea, but if you could also get that idea done, kudos to you, my hat off to you.
Mm.
So that's kind of how I do it. You have to compartmentalize, because it can beat you down. It can feel, especially when you're a giving person, you want to bring people together. Your whole mission in life is to see other people succeed. I'm learning a lot about myself on this podcast, John. You're killing it. Thank you so much.
No
But
problem.
I had no idea about all this good stuff coming out. But yeah,
I'll
if you've
I'll
heard
give you my Venmo at the end. The
things,
therapy is about $100
I
an hour,
gotcha.
so
Yes,
it's, yeah.
just send me a receipt.
Yeah, no,
We're good to go.
I'm very intrigued by this because
Yeah.
a good buddy of mine, a photographer by the name of Tyler James, has
Mhm.
someone that I've met over the last couple of years via Instagram. He's been on the podcast twice, and we talk about a lot of the
Okay.
same things. And for me, Tyler is a kid who, he's not a kid. He's he's around my age, but he's a person
Sure.
who, no matter where he goes in life, whether he's where he grew up in Minnesota, he's now in Houston, he builds communities, and he wants to see
Hmm.
people succeed, and he wants the people around them to eat, right? Like, that's his thing. Like, I want to make sure the people around me are taken care of and doing well. And to
It's my
me,
kind of guy.
that's what you're like, and I think that's what I'm
Yeah.
like. And finding people who are like part of your quote unquote tribe as you get older is probably the most important thing in life, right? It's not about, like, when I was in my 20s, I would be jealous if I heard someone closed a big deal. I would be jealous if someone was doing XYZ that was in excess of whatever I was doing. And I don't know what
Sure.
it has been about the last couple of years of my life, but I'm not like that at all anymore. I want to put people together. I want to do things like you're saying, because that's what life is. It's about helping people. It's
Yeah.
about being a good person. But I for sure
Yeah.
wasn't always that way. No shot.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great evolution, and it's a great story. I wish more people felt the way you and I do. The world would
We're,
be a much different place.
we're getting there.
I think we're unicorns.
I
Yeah.
think it's getting there. Like, at the end of the day, like, 95% of people's lives are lived on a communication device, right? So, like, while we have instant access to every single person in our life, it's also, like, a bit damaging in that regard, because it can cause stress in a way that human beings weren't taught to be stressed about, through hunter and gatherer.
Yeah.
You've obviously
Yeah.
you've worn a lot of hats in your professional life, and I'm curious if, from a profession perspective, if you have like a main goal, a main dream, something that is like the pinnacle of where you can stop and say, "Hey, I did the thing that I've been working my entire life to do, and, like, holy shit, I can't believe I just accomplished that."
Yeah, for me, that would be, I mean, I've produced events on the Statue of Liberty, the Intrepid, just these beautiful, in the Capitol, these beautiful, historic American things that mean something to me. I've done that in that side of my business. Um, our non-for-profit's a place that I definitely want to see grow. I love New York so much. I'm in Atlanta right now. Don't ask me how I got here. It's a whole nother podcast episode, which we'll have to do. But my heart's in New York. So I think for me, I want to bring business, and I want to see New York get back to the way it was when I was little, running around the Bronx, and I want to feel safe I want everyone to feel safe there. I want it to thrive, that pulse that I sought out my whole life. I want to help bring that back. So a lot of our initiatives through our non-for-profit are leaning into that, working with New York City nightlife. We have a wonderful nightlife mayor. Her name is Ariel Pallets, and we're working with her office on some initiatives, which is great. We want to help bring that light back. So that's something that is a goal of mine for sure. Also, I want to get one of my TV shows on the air.
Mm-hmm.
We've come so close. We've put years of work into development and being creative and drawing inspiration from life. I want to see that represented. I want to turn on the TV and see created by an executive producer, Frank Carlisi, and my partner, Tim Grady, of course. But that is my goal. I'm not going to stop till we get it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
so those are my two goals.
I would imagine a lot of what you do this year, aside from like, make money and live and eat, will be centered around doing that.
I will.
There's obviously a lot of pressure in life when you're looking at the thing that you want to do and you haven't achieved it yet. So I'm curious how you deal with, in an industry like television production. I would imagine there is a tremendous and a plethora amount of rejection, right? So how do you take those rejections and those negative instances of being told no and, learn from them and grow?
I am a phenomenal note taker. I don't take it personally, and I'm very cognizant to say we failed here, but this is what we learned. We applied it to the next project and got it stronger and better. And we have been on that trajectory after rejection after rejection, after our show didn't get picked up by Lifetime when we filmed it during COVID, and we got that call from the production company and they said, it's a pass, unfortunately, for us. What did I do? I sat there and I analyzed everything we did, and I said, we're going to take parts of A and B and put it in the next project. So that's kind of how I handle the rejection. We just got news and said, that wasn't great the other day. And I said to my partner, I said, but we learned how to do this skill set in that process. And I can't imagine what 3 shows from now are going to look like, because we're learning. And I think people generally they don't listen they don't listen. Everyone's in their own head waiting for their voice to come out. Maybe that's my upbringing. Maybe it's being part of the LGBTQIA community where I repressed my voice for many of my adolescent years, but I am a phenomenal listener. I'm more interested in what you're saying than anything that's ever going to come out of my mouth. I'll be on a business call and I don't speak. I will sit there and listen. I want, and then I'll ask a very appropriate question, but my voice doesn't need to fill the room. That's just not who I am.
Yeah.
So those are some of my sort of, methods and qualities of listening, using what you may have failed or not done right and applying it to whatever you're doing at the time. That's kind of how I deal with it.
There's that expression that goes, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you speak. And there is something to be said for having the self-cognitive ability to be a better listener. It's something that I've worked a lot on the last few years, because extremely on point of what you said. It's very easy when you're having conversation with someone, whether you're in a podcast, whether you're at a bar, whatever you're doing, to want to add your tidbit to the thing that the person's saying. It takes a lot of restraint to wait, right? I'm going to forget what I was going to say, so I have to say it right away. And it's like, that's wrong. And the amount of life lessons that I've learned by shutting the fuck up just in the last 5 years of my life has been tremendous. And I think that's such a crucial opportunity for people to learn through failure. Because if you're not, once you get the no, if you're tuned out to the why, you're never going to learn. You're never going to grow.
No,
You're going to be
you're
stuck
done.
you're going to be stuck in the position that you're in. And I think
Yeah.
it's an incredible perspective to have, and something that for sure not many people have.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but I am super curious what it was like being a member of the LGBTQIA community in, the Bronx in the 90s and
Mm-hmm.
growing up in an Italian family. I can't
Yeah.
imagine that was all sunshine, daisies, and roses. So I'm
No.
super curious how that impacted kind of like your adulthood.
Yeah, I definitely think it was difficult. It wasn't anything that was accepted in the neighborhoods I grew up with at the time
Mm-hmm.
of in culture. It wasn't, there was no representation in media, no one to look up at the TV. They were characterizations, gay men on television,
Totally. Will and Grace,
Will
right?
and
Yeah.
Grace,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course,
Right.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, and I, as a child, I drew all of my inspiration from pop culture, all of it. Comic books, number one. I have a sleeve of X-Men
Oh,
tattoos
sweet.
that go around.
Nice.
That was my escape growing up. Because I always felt they were, again, another podcast, but looking at a marginalized community
Of quote
of
unquote
people.
mutants, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yes, exactly. So I identified there, but I always looked to pop culture for that, and there was nothing to see. So, the challenge of pretending to be something that I wasn't up until my mid 20s, if you will,
Yeah.
to repress that because Italian American, we forgot Catholic. Let's
Sure.
not forget that.
We can if you want.
Okay, good. Good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very difficult. It was just I think that's where my lack of confidence
Oh,
comes from.
totally understandable. Yeah.
I remember, I'll tell you a story. I remember I was walking to probably the comic book store, and my friend's mother's beeping the horn at me. And it's on a main street in the Bronx, and she's beeping the horn, and she screams out her window. Like, everyone calls me Frankie in the neighborhood, of course. And she's like, "Frankie, pick your head up." And I'm like, "What, Mary Ellen, what?" She goes, "You're walking with your head down, and you're looking at your feet in the floor." And that, I think, is what I did almost my whole life. I went inside my body, and I looked down and kept my head down. And I think that was, I mean, when I talk about that now, I get goosebumps that this woman identified in me that I was not open enough, not confident enough. And I was repressing myself so much that this young kid, probably going to buy a Spider-Man comic book, she saw that. So that's me. That's who I am. And it carried into my whole entire life. And it wasn't until I felt comfortable telling people that I was gay, that I found career success and personal success. But it took a long time, my friend, a long time.
I mean, I think that's number one. That's beautiful. Number two, I think the ability to like self-identify, like triggering moments like that in your past will lead to tremendous long-term growth without question. I can't obviously relate to a story like that, right? Like my biggest issue with the entire, stigmatization of LGBTQIA is like, who the fuck cares, right? Like,
right.
I'm, I guess, extremely pragmatic in that I don't really give a shit who someone loves. Like, love who you want, marry who you want. I don't understand why these are conversations in 2022 that we're having. Like, that to me is crazy. It's just not something I can relate to. I've got gay friends, I've got straight friends. I don't really care who you love. Love who you love, be loved. I want people to be happy. And I can't relate to that. But to me, it sounds like you were able to take something that was like obviously challenging, being, a gay man in the 90s and growing up in an Italian Catholic community, and been able to turn it into a positive, because you're obviously doing things right? Like, we wouldn't be here having this conversation today if you weren't like killing life. So kudos to you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It means a lot to hear that from you. Yeah, it's just something that I fought with, and I really tried to, like you said, spin it into something positive. Sometimes it would make you throw yourself into work too much, or miss a family event because you didn't want to be sitting at the table going, "Where? How come you didn't bring a girlfriend?"
Yeah.
You know, that
Hmm.
you shy away from certain things you love, and being around family as Italian Americans, like all you want to do is be. But sometimes I wouldn't want to go, and it goes against my nature
Yeah.
because of that. So all that learning, and that's why our non-for-profit, we work with transgender women of color, almost primarily, in a lot of our educational programs. And the reason for that is a population that needs the most support.
Totally.
So that's something that all of those feelings that I repressed and I felt growing up, I'm trying to channel into that,
Mm.
because there is so much stigma. There's so much hate and anger towards the transgender community that now that's my way of, back to the question about, I'm telling you, you're going to have to send me an invoice at the end of this, of course.
Yeah.
But back to how I measure success is, it's using what hurt me growing up through my life and channeling that into a positive for someone else.
See, that's amazing.
That's
And
it.
that's really great.
That's it.
The biggest thing that I struggle with is that, to me, I don't understand where people have the time in their own lives to care this strongly about what another human being is doing with their body, with
Right.
their life, with who they love.
Yeah.
Like, to me, and this is goes back to the religion statement. Like, I've got multiple religious tattoos. I grew up in a Catholic family. I don't go to church anymore. I'm a firm believer in there being an afterlife, and there being a God, whether that God is, a extraterrestrial being or Jesus Christ. I don't
Yeah.
fucking know. I'm not going to pretend that I know. But like, to me, like, that's the problem I have with religion. It's becoming non-inclusive, right? You can't get married in a
Right.
church if you're a gay person. They have very I think antiquated views on abortion, things that don't matter anymore, right? Like, you need to be able to live your life as you see fit. And like, to me, I just don't genuinely understand where people have the time in their day to worry about what other people are doing. Like, dude, go to fucking work. Be happy. Who the fuck cares what people are doing that don't affect you?
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
where do you, I don't know where they get the time. I'm busy as shit. I don't have time to worry about other people. I barely have enough time to worry about myself. It's insane.
You're right.
It's bonkers.
Well, it goes back to the conversation about people want to interject their voice and they're not listening.
Totally.
It's the truth. It's the same mantra. It's the same through line.
It's a tragic reality of the times that we live in, because when you have access to be able to say anything at any time to anyone, why you would spend that time pushing out hate versus like just being fucking a normal person is beyond, it's beyond me. Frank, I like to spend the last bit of every podcast doing sort of like a rapid Q&A. Some of these questions are easy. Some of them are a little in depth, just kind of whatever comes to mind. But start off with what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is The Lord of the Rings. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Nerd.
Nothing to be sorry about. That's a good one.
The trilogy. I can't give you one in any particular order. All three of them in one place. I've read that 12 times.
What's your favorite movie?
Cover to cover. Oof, this is
going
to be tough. Moonstruck, The Godfather Part 2.
Always Part 2. Every Italian knows it's always Part 2.
Moonstruck literally was my childhood growing up, that Sicilian household. And I mean, I love, again, The Lord of the Rings, anything like that. So those will be my top ones for now.
What's your favorite food?
My mother's chicken cutlets.
Yeah.
I still can't get them exactly the same way she did. I think that's why I went to culinary school, and I just can't get them that perfect.
As a like actual certified chef, I think you got to be able to figure this out, right? Or it's like that little bit of love that was baked into it that you just can't replicate.
It was just my mom's love. I can't get it. I could put cheese in the batter. It doesn't matter. It's just not my mom.
Nah. That's nostalgia, right? What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear would be to leave this earth and not have changed as many rules, people's lives that I can. That would be my biggest fear, to just be forgotten
Mm,
and not remembered for something that I did.
I like that.
Hmm.
Do
I
you?
don't fear death. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I would say, do you
Yeah,
believe in an afterlife?
definitely. Absolutely. Especially ever since my mother passed away. I speak to her every day. I ask her advice. I know when she's meddling in my life because she always did. And I yell at her sometimes. I have a conversation. So there is, my mother's there somewhere. And I know it. I could tell you that with 100% certainty. I can't tell you anything else with certainty. I know that there's an afterlife.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I would say I've
Yep.
asked that question. This is episode 64, 65. I'm not sure what number I'm on now. Um,
Yep.
we're about 80-20 for people who believe in an afterlife. And
Okay.
I find with that being the case is slightly reassuring for the longevity of the humanity of man. Because if enough
Sure.
people think there's something beyond, like maybe people will just stop being less dicks. Like that's my hope at least.
Yep.
Are you happy?
I am. I'm very happy now.
Good.
Wasn't always,
Yeah.
but I could be happier, and I'm working every day to being happy.
I
Right.
think
So yeah.
that's important.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years, hopefully I'm splitting my time between Atlanta and New York. I have hopefully have a child by then,
Hmm.
a little daughter, I hope, in my vision board. I hope that our non-for-profit is doing national galas and raising money for people and making a real impact. I hope we have a TV show on the air that's not just some fluff show. It's actually the subject matter means something. I hope to be surrounded by family and friends, and yeah, and my little niece is happy and healthy. That's all I care about.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
What inspires you?
Other people inspire me. Creative people inspire me. Uh, no matter what they're creating, just someone that can take an idea, grab it, and put it and make it something. That is to me the ultimate bit of inspiration.
Hmm.
That process from it being in the air, grabbing the spirit and turning it into something beautiful. I don't think there's anything more inspirational than that, honestly.
I love that. Yeah. What's
Yeah.
the best piece of advice someone's ever given you?
The best piece of advice is don't, there's a few, but I'm going to honestly say my partner um, is, and it's going to be a generic bit of advice. It's just live in the moment and it is what it is. Do I believe him half the time? No, I don't. Is it an argument? I'm like, how the fuck can you? I'm clear. No, but it's going to happen no matter whether you try to control it or not. So let it happen as it should.
Yeah.
Really,
I'm a big believer
that's
in
from
that.
Steve.
That with the when you go through something like every human being on Earth did over the last 2 years, I think the fact that there is no
Hmm.
guarantee for tomorrow, it makes you start to
Hmm.
appreciate like really small, mundane things that you would otherwise overlook, right? Like I get a
Yeah.
text message every night from my mom before I go to bed. She says, "Good night, I love you,"
Hmm.
and it's like one
I
of those
love
things
that.
that like I'm gonna eventually not have anymore, right? So like when you put that into the context of like what is important on a daily basis, it's the little
Mm.
things. I'm a big
You're
believer in that.
you're still gonna have it. Don't worry about it. You'll always have that.
Yeah,
I know it. I could tell you that. I could tell you that from experience.
I'm sure
No
I
matter
will.
where she is, you're gonna get that
I
feeling.
genuinely do believe that. For sure.
Yeah.
Last question. Give me a recommendation for something that you've recently consumed. It could be a movie, a TV show, a podcast, a book, just something that you've had, consumed lately that you enjoyed and want everybody to check out.
Oh, that's a good one too. I mean, I'll go through TV quickly. Um, Ozark,
So good.
new season.
So good.
Yellow Jackets on Showtime.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard
I've
of
I've
this?
heard good
Oh my
things.
goodness.
I should watch it. Yeah.
If you're a 90s kid, it's nostalgia. It's incredible. So those are TV. Any of let's do comic books. Any of the new X-Men comic books right now are phenomenal. The artwork, everything, the storyline, it's so inclusive and brilliant. Read comic books. I mean, everyone should. There's so much art in there. It's such a beautiful expression of culture. So that's going to be my general recommendation. Everyone should look at life through eyes of a child sometimes in everything you do. That's a recommendation. I have a tattoo of my mother that I got when she was 12 years old, maybe. I don't even know how old she was. It's on my body, and I look at it every day and I say, I want to look at life through her eyes when she was that age. No sickness, there's no cancer. There's just these beautiful brown eyes looking at the world. And that's the advice I want to give everyone. Look at life that way. And that's my recommendation. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, I mean, I think that was really beautiful. I think that's like important. I think it's so easy in life to go through shit and not realize how fundamentally short and finite the amount of time that we have. And if people spent a lot more time worrying about being happy and a lot less time worrying about other people, I think the world could be a much better place. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I have a very cheesy line. I often say, if you've been on my podcast, you're part of my family. Welcome to the family. My paisan Frank in Atlanta. And yeah, super, super appreciative for the hour that you spent with me today. And just thank you so much for coming on.
John, I can't thank you enough. I mean, this was one of the best experiences ever, and I will look forward to the invoice in the mail. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Take care.